This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandi Giambrone and this is Emily Momberger. We will be presenting on multiple disabilities. What is a disability? The Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, Section 300.8 defines a person with disabilities as a child evaluated in accordance with Sections 300.304 through 300.311 of the Individuals with Disabilities Act and is determined as having at least one of the 13 listed disability categories, and due to the disability requires specialized services and care. This refers to students ages 3 through 9 experiencing developmental delays requiring specialized services and care. Developmental delays include physical, communication, social or emotional, or adaptive development.
So how do we define multiple disabilities? According to IDEA, multiple disabilities is when a person is diagnosed with two or more of the 13 categories of disabilities. The combination of these disabilities is severe enough to require specialized services and care for the child, such as a one-to-one paraprofessional in a special education classroom. Each impairment is considered the primary disability due to the severity of its impact on the person, and neither is referred to as secondary. Section 300.8(9) of IDEA defines multiple disabilities as impairments such as intellectual disability and blindness, the combination of which is such severe enough that it cannot be accommodated in a special education program solely for one of the impairments. Important to note is that multiple disabilities does not include deaf blindness by itself. The New York State Department of Education's definition is almost identical to IDEA's, but uses outdated terminology such as the term mental retardation. Of note, some states have different or more restrictive definitions for multiple disabilities. For example, the Colorado Department of Education requires that one of the impairments is an intellectual disability.
Multiple disabilities or mental retardation. The New York State Education website includes outdated terminology and has not been updated since June 2010. These resources must be updated to include appropriate terminology, including person-first language. This New York State Special Education website still has the terminology mental retardation instead of intellectual disability. It defines mental retardation as significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning, existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a student's educational performance. As we learn more about disabilities, we need to eliminate our biases, change our thinking, and use the correct terminology to create a more inclusive community. This slide shows a screenshot from the New York State Special Education website with its outdated terminology.
So who has multiple disabilities? Within the United States, 2% of all students who receive special education services have multiple disabilities. In New York State in 2021, 2.7% of all students receiving special education programs and services were categorized as students with multiple disabilities. You can see here in this graph that 2% for multiple disabilities is one of the smallest percentages of people categorized in IDEA. The causes of multiple disabilities are as varied as the diagnosis itself. Some of these causes are as follows, including lack of oxygen, premature birth, genetic disorders, injuries from accidents, and as you can see, others. So as mentioned, multiple disabilities occur when a person is diagnosed with two or more of IDEA's 13 categories of disabilities listed here from section 300.8 of IDEA. Of note, deaf blindness is not a multiple disability, as I mentioned before, but when paired with another disability, such as an intellectual disability or a specific learning disability, then that person would be categorized as having multiple disabilities. So I will now go into the general characteristics for students with multiple disabilities, and then Brandi will share a case study afterwards going into more specifics. So due to the broad range of disabilities, a child's characteristics largely depends on the number of disabilities a child has, which disabilities are involved, and how severe each disability is. When teaching students with multiple disabilities, you may notice that they have skill regression or difficult maintaining skills that are learned if the student is absent for a period of time, and skill recruitment, or when it takes significantly longer to relearn skills. Although all students face skill regression to some extent, we can advocate for students with multiple disabilities to attend summer school to maintain some of those skills. Students may also have difficulty generalizing or transferring skills from familiar environments to new settings or activities, such as learning to count to 10 on their fingers and then having difficulty using an object to count to 10. One thing to note is that cognitive ability levels vary widely from student to student. Some students may require assistance in basic life skills such as eating or tying their shoes, while others may require significant more assistance during the day. Similarly to students requiring speech language assistance, students with multiple disabilities may also need more time to process their thoughts and respond to questions. Students may have trouble focusing or have a lack of concentration skills, but this doesn't mean that they don't or can't have a desire to learn. Additionally, for psychomotor characteristics, depending on the severity of the disability, students with multiple disabilities may require mobility aids such as a wheelchair or a walking brace. Students may also require alternative seating, a change in position, and more breaks during physical education, or more time allotted to get to the next transition or the next classroom. Other students will have abnormal muscle formation or difficulty with speech language or oral communication. So as a teacher of students with multiple disabilities, it's important to be aware that some students may struggle with self-motivation, self-confidence, and emotional immaturity, and others may have difficulty with initiating, maintaining, and ending social interactions. So some general challenges that students with multiple disabilities may face. One difficulty is that students with multiple disabilities work with their team to determine if certain obstacles to accessing the curriculum are the result of either primary disability or a combination of both. So one example we found concerned a nonverbal student with a traumatic brain injury and a visual impairment who used a wheelchair and a screen as a visual aid. The physical therapist and the teacher discovered the student had muscle fatigue in their neck, which made it difficult to look at the screen placed directly in front of the student. So they moved the screen to the left and down so that the student was able to rest their head while looking at the screen. This dramatically improved the student's ability to participate in class, as well as her self-confidence and being able to do the coursework. So speaking of visual aids, many students may require augmentative or alternative communication, or AAC, for optimal daily functioning in the classroom. AAC is basically all the ways people can communicate other than oral speech. Augmentative is adding to someone's speech, while alternative is using a method other than speech. There are a lot of different types of AAC. No-tech and low-tech options include gestures and facial expressions, writing, drawing, spelling words by pointing to letters, and pointing to photos or pictures. High-tech options include things like using an app on a tablet to communicate and using a computer with a voice, sometimes called speech generating device. So another challenge students face is a variety of health conditions may accompany severe disabilities, such as seizures, aspiration pneumonia, or a tracheotomy tube. Differing health conditions can cause increased absence from school, differing levels of challenges with oral speech, communication, or mobility, and result in different cognitive abilities. Depending on the health condition, the student may require a one-to-one alternative school schedule, and of course, differentiated instruction or coursework. So lastly, another common challenge is that students may have difficulty in building peer relationships with students with or without disabilities. I do want to again emphasize the very broad range of abilities for students with multiple disabilities. And just as some neurotypical students may have trouble making friends, students with multiple disabilities may have additional barriers. Students may have difficulty in expressing themselves and in understanding others, which would limit how they can convey their needs, their wants, and their thoughts. Physical disabilities may also prevent students from displaying gestures such as a wave or a smile. So, general implications for teachers to keep in mind is to ensure students succeed to the best of their ability in the classroom. We must be careful not to limit our students based on our perceptions of them, and recognize we may require additional training to feel prepared to teach students with multiple disabilities. By obtaining relevant, broad knowledge of multiple disabilities, we become aware of the challenges and resources available so we can provide the best instruction possible. Part of providing excellent instruction is ensuring we are utilizing adaptive communication and assistive technology for learning when necessary. Teachers and other staff need to ensure these resources are not only being used, but they're being used correctly to optimize learning and independence. It's important that all staff involved with the student are on the same page with which communication devices and methods are being used so that we don't accidentally limit the student's communication and opportunities for learning. Next, a multidisciplinary team consisting of the student's parents, educational specialists, administration, medical specialists in the areas in which the individual demonstrates problems should all work together to plan and coordinate necessary services. And lastly, this one I found really interesting, that research has shown that communicative rather than individualistic teaching styles encourages active student participation. In turn, this provides more opportunities to create those relationships with peers, with students with or without disabilities. For example, teachers that embrace a more constructivist approach may rely more on group work, which is then opening the door for students not only to work together, but to get to know each other and build upon that relationship. Along the same lines, as peer relationships, peer tutoring has also been shown to increase student understanding of a topic. So the main point about general implications for teachers is it's important that we are not limiting our students who require more assistance, and we create a classroom environment in which no one feels excluded. And now I'll hand it to Brandi for our case study.
Okay, the case study that we reviewed is the perceptions of teachers' preparedness to teach deaf and hard of hearing students with additional disabilities, a qualitative case study by Mazuka, Gentry, and Meek. Mazuka et al. Reviewed studies of students who are deaf and hard of hearing who also have additional disabilities and their teachers' preparedness. Multiple disabilities is a very diverse category. In this study, Mazuka et al. Provided information on different disabilities students who are deaf may have. The most prevalent additional disabilities observed during this study are learning disabilities, autism, intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, attention deficit disorders, emotional behavioral disorders, and visual impairments. Other disabilities that can occur are included here on the slide. Young, deaf, and hard of hearing children can have developmental delays, including cognitive, gross motor, personal, social, and communication skills. This broad range of disabilities can co-occur, makes it essential for you as the teacher to learn about each disability and how they affect your student. When multiple disabilities are discovered early in a person's life, they can receive the required assistance they need, but not all students with disabilities will be diagnosed early in life or have parents that are knowledgeable or supportive of their needs. When a child enters school, many professionals can help to recognize different learning disabilities a student might have and help them to receive special services that are beneficial to them. Language and communication are essential for all students. Masuka et al. Found how essential visual communication is for students who are deaf and hard of hearing and have additional disabilities. Students using ASL to communicate performed much higher academically with the addition of visual communication. So sign language is a form of communication that can be learned to help students with multiple disabilities. Masuka et al. Included information about a young student who is deaf and has autism. The study found that using sign language to communicate with the student allowed them to express themselves more precisely and efficiently, allowing them to feel more confident and successful. Students who are deaf and hard of hearing and have additional disabilities can be found in various educational settings depending on the severity of their disabilities. These include special schools for the deaf, public schools, private schools, mainstream classrooms, and special education and specially designed programs. This is why it is important for all teachers to have an understanding of disabilities and how they can impact the students in your classroom. Teachers, parents, and specialists must work together to decide what is the best for the student. When determining educational placement for a student with multiple disabilities, the student's needs must come first. A question is whether the learning environment suits the needs of the student, and if not, how can we better meet their specific needs? Students who are deaf and have multiple disabilities may require additional aid, such as a support staff or a hearing device, in addition to the other disabilities that they may have. A vital tool for all who work with students with special disabilities, multiple disabilities, is the Individualized Education Plan, or IEP. IEPs are critical for recognizing the different disabilities a student has and how to work best with them. Teachers face many challenges when working with students with multiple disabilities, so continued research and support are essential. Teachers must keep each student and their disabilities in mind while regarding curriculum planning, implementation, and assessment. In this study, teachers reported using a self-designed curriculum to meet individual students' needs and a curriculum which was implemented in regular educational programs. Most teachers in the study reported the need to align their curriculum with the state's educational and transitional standards. Teachers must be proficient in teaching techniques and strategies, managing the classroom environment, and collaborating with the IEP team. Some effective learning strategies to include when developing curriculum identified in the study include cooperative, problem-based, inquiry-based, differentiated instruction, self-determination, and quality of life teaching strategies. When assessing, some students may require more time to respond to questions. Visual aids may be helpful when communicating questions and responses. Students who are deaf and hard of hearing may have additional assessments, including audiological, to help determine their hearing capabilities. This information is important because it allows the teacher to know what the student is capable of and understands how to better work with them. If the student wears a hearing device, the device must work and the teacher must understand how to use it. Alternate forms of communication may be needed to be assessed if the student uses sign language. The study also concluded consultation and collaboration with family and other professionals, knowledge of behavior management, learning difficulties, autism, cognitive development, physical and health-related issues, vision, deaf-blindness, sensory integration, speech, transition, and gifted and talented are critical in helping every student to succeed. The adequate education of teachers working with students with multiple disabilities is vital for the success of all students.
So for general assessment practices, again, it's important to note that these are general because there's a broad range of multiple disabilities. But for general assessment practices, we did not include specific medical assessment practice or tests for diagnosis because obviously there's no specific test for multiple disabilities. Some general information is that it can be difficult to obtain a diagnosis due to overlapping behavior and symptoms, which can result in over or under diagnosis. And during assessments, medical professionals will attempt to isolate certain behaviors to differentiate between disabilities. What we do know is that children with severe disabilities require systematic, long-term curricular, instructional, and environmental accommodations and support based on the assessment data. Assessment data is often collected using alternative means of assessment based on differing abilities of the student. Alternative means can include utilizing technology when it can be beneficial, always matching pictures with written words, and obtaining visual or auditory tests, such as the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test for students who are nonverbal or having difficulties with oral communication, which you can see pictured on the slide here. Lastly, teachers can advocate for students with multiple disabilities through individualized education plan annual reviews. We can collect data through informal and formal assessments to use to recommend alternative assessment practices, such as giving additional time, using a human speaker, or taking the test separately from other students.
Now we're going to go over our 5 strategies for anyone working with someone who has multiple disabilities. Our first strategy is to familiarize yourself with each student's IEP. These IEPs are specific to that particular student, so take your time to familiarize yourself with that IEP. It's going to have all the information that you need and the people to contact for help with that particular student. Our second strategy is that every student is unique, and so are their disabilities. You're not going to find 2 students that have the same disabilities and the same ways to help them. So get to know your students and each disability that they have and how to work with that student, how severe their functioning is, and how you can help them best.
Another strategy is to promote building peer relationships through group activities. Peer interactions are far more demanding, complex, and unpredictable compared to adult-child interactions because peer relationships are usually at the same social developmental level and are unstructured. One-to-ones or other support staff can help build these relationships by social scaffolding or monitoring and leading interactions, either directly or indirectly. Staff can assist by talking about the intentions of the peers when it's unclear, or redirecting touch between peers, such as moving a peer's hand from blocking the visual aid and onto the table instead. Strategy 4, as previously discussed, is it's important to implement AAC when necessary. We want the student to use AAC with as little assistance as possible to facilitate and build independence. Also, the student's team should determine the goals of using the equipment before implementation and ensure the method or device fits with the family's lifestyle so that it can be used at school and at home. And lastly, multidisciplinary planning and collaboration is critical to help students with multiple disabilities succeed. As many of you are aware, classrooms already hold weekly or monthly meetings to discuss student progress and concerns. To support students with multiple disabilities, these teams will meet before a student joins the classroom or meet more often. Of note, the multidisciplinary team should include medical professionals if possible, such as the school nurse, if not with the student's physician or psychiatrist.
And on this slide, you'll see our references if you're interested in looking further into some of the information we've provided for you. And then there's some more references for you as well. And our last slide includes our questions. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We really hope you learned something new, and we look forward to seeing your answers to our questions. Bye, thank you.
Thank you.